Hi everyone. Today I'm showing you all a replay I recorded in my Schors the other day. So this replay I think demonstrates some of the strengths and the weaknesses of the Schors, and some of what you should be trying to do when you're in a situation where there's a lot of battleships on the enemy team and you're in a very squishy cruiser. So to start with introducing the ship, if you've never played the Schors, basically the deal with the Schors is you're extraordinarily squishy, but on the flip side you have insanely good DPM. So basically, the reason you're really, really squishy is a couple of reasons. So first of all, you're very, very fragile. Your armor isn't the greatest. You actually have weaker armor than the Badyani at tier 6. And in addition to that, you're a really large target. So this thing is pretty long for a cruiser. And on top of all that, you're a little slow to accelerate, and your turning radius is huge, and your rudder shift is also really long for a cruiser. And so all those things combined make you a really juicy target for battleships. So you notice I'm spotted and I'm immediately being aimed at by 2 enemy ships. I think I'm actually going to stay still here for a little bit too long. I think I need to start accelerating here, and I'm going to eat a little bit of damage because of that. And so that's what I mean, right? And it didn't help that I was being stationary. I was kind of making it a little bit easy for them. In retrospect, I definitely should have started accelerating and just tried to get out of here. But in this situation, like, I'm kind of hanging back from the main battle. And so the advantage of, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm trying to take advantage of the strengths of the Schors. So on the one hand, you're extraordinarily fragile, but on the other hand, you have this extraordinarily powerful DPM. So you get 12 guns, you get, I believe, 3 in 4 turrets. They're 152mm guns, and they fire about every 7 seconds. I think it's actually 7.5 seconds, roughly. Little less now that I've taken damage, my AR is kicking in. Now, if you have IFHE on top of that, that means that your damage against battleships can be absolutely insane. So in order to take advantage of that, and take advantage of the fact that I have pretty decent gun arcs and pretty good shell velocity, I'm kind of hanging back. You'll notice that the matchmaking that I'm in is tier 8, which is not really ideal, but it's not the worst possible situation. But they have a lot of battleships. They have 5 battleships. And, like, if those guys see me, like, unless they have a juicier target to shoot at, like a broadside Hipper or Baltimore, they're going to shoot at me if they have that opportunity. So my plan is to just try and, like, stay as far back as I can, try and keep the range of engagement long, and just drop massive bombs on these guys. So you saw that was a salvo against a Bismarck tier 8 battleship. I did about 3,000 damage to him. His next salvo was not very well aimed, but even though he only hit, like, 2 shots, I still did about 1,400 damage. And so, like, and you'll notice that as soon as I get spotted, I'm being aimed at by 3 ships, right? So this is what I mean. Like, if people see you, they will want to shoot at you, even if there are better targets spotted. And I don't actually think the Hipper and the Baltimore are spotted, so this is probably just because I'm the only one they can really have to shoot at. But, like, the reality is that if you're in situations, a lot of times, if battleships have a choice between shooting you and another cruiser, they'll shoot you, because you're just so easy to just completely fuck up. So anyway, that's the situation I'm in, and that's my mindset with this game. I'm getting a little bit closer because I want to try and use these islands a little bit for concealment, and I'm just trying to shoot at these battleships. Now notice how the enemy battleships are positioned. They're all kind of close in, they're all getting into the fight, and so they're all kind of in a position where they're sort of have the ability to kind of bully our cruisers away. Whereas if you notice, our Bismarck is in D6, our Colorado is in D8 behind the island, and so those guys aren't really having a lot of an impact on this fight right now. They may as well not be here. Whereas the enemy battleships are right up, you know, pretty close to the cap circle, as close as they can get with our Guayamata in there. And so what that means is that, like, us cruisers have to be a little bit more careful. Like, I can't really get any closer because if I get spotted and shot at by those battleships, I'll just be killed really, really quickly. I mean, you saw what happened earlier when I was still reasonably far out. They were still able to get citadels on me, even though I was angled and far away. So my plan is to just let these guys push in. There's a, like, 4,000 damage salvo, right? That's the strength of this ship. You're not the most maneuverable. Your turning circle is terrible. You're really easy to kill. Your torpedoes are 4-kilometer torps. They're not that good. But your DPM is absolutely brutal. And so if you get into a situation where you have battleships at reasonably long range pushing into you, that's really, really good for you because you can just kite them away and shoot them with HE. So I've fallen back a little bit, pretty far. And the reason for that is because they have a lot of battleships kind of up there, and I just want to shoot this Bismarck at kind of long range. I don't want to get too close, because if I get too close, I'm just going to get deleted. Right now, there's nothing really stopping their battleships from pushing in. We have a Guayamata who could theoretically torp into D, but all the battleships have to do is go around the outer edge of D, and they'll be able to push in just fine. Like, their North Carolina is super out of position. Well, one of their North Carolinas. The other North Carolina is kind of back behind the cap circle. All they have to do is push in, and this Bismarck is going to do exactly that. If I had stayed up there, where, like, a little bit behind where that Baltimore is, I would probably be getting shot and probably die here, because it would be really easy for them to just one-hit delete me. And that's just the risk that, like, the thing you have to understand when you're playing this ship is that you're just so easy to delete. So what I'm doing is I'm actually going to get kind of around into the middle of the map, and I'm going to shoot at this Bismarck as he's pushing in. So I actually have an opportunity to sort of feather shots in between these two islands here, and I'm actually going to be able to pound this Bismarck from long range. And so you'll be able to start to see kind of that DPM that I'm talking about. So I'm just putting shots into this guy. Literally all I'm doing is just sitting back and farming him as he pushes in. There's a 2K volley and a fire. I mean, you just, the thing is, you just have so many guns that with IFHE, you can just brutalize battleships. There's another 2K volley, right? And those aren't like amazing volleys for this ship. Like, I've been getting 4K, 3K volleys, and I put that out every about 7 seconds. That was just badly aimed. Because he's now going behind the island, so now I don't really have shots anymore. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about actually about this ship. You'll notice I'm running defensive AA. So a couple reasons for this. Basically, the choice you have is defensive AA or hydroacoustic search. Now, when you're thinking about which of those to pick, you need to think, all right, what's the situation where those are going to be useful? In this ship, I don't often find myself in situations where it's useful for me to have hydroacoustic search. Because you have to play so passively, it's not very frequent that you get into positions where you're able to, like, push into destroyers and fuck them up. Like, yeah, it sometimes happens, but, like, it's not very common because you have to play so chill with this ship. And, like, even if I do push in, I'm such a huge target and I'm so, like, not very maneuverable that a lot of times it's really easy for them to just land massive torp salvos on me. So then why do you not use Hydra and why do you use DAA? The reason you use DAA is because, for the same reasons, you're a really juicy target for carriers. And I've been in several situations where carriers target me, and even with DAA, it's not good. So I can't even imagine, like, how I would have survived some of those situations if I had not had DAA. It doesn't matter in this game because, like, they don't have a CV, which is fine, but in a lot of situations, it's really more useful to have defensive AA. I think in a lot of cruisers, it's more of a, like, personal preference situation. So, like, there are a lot of ships that have a choice between defensive AA and hydroacoustic search, and in that scenario, it's mostly just up to your personal preference. Like, I think in the Badiani, it's really more a personal preference thing than, like, out of necessity, you should pick one of these or the other. In this ship, I think it's a lot more cut and dry. I think you should be running defensive AA. I think it's just more useful. I found it a lot more useful. I've been in a lot more situations where I'm coming under carrier attack than, you know, when I'm in a situation where I'm being attacked where I'm trying to push into a destroyer. So this Prince Eugen is going to push in and die, and that's not really great because it's going to leave me as kind of the target. But if you've been watching, like, the just beatdown I've been putting on this poor Nagato, every few seconds I'm putting out these massive damage volleys. If you're paying attention to the damage counter at the top of the screen, I think I've done like 20,000 damage to this guy so far. I think, am I going to get the kill? I am going to get the kill. So I am able to shell this guy to death. And so now I'm in a situation where it's difficult for me to try and disengage here. So I've kind of tried to push in a little bit because I noticed that my team was winning by a lot, and I wanted to kind of get a little more damage. But unfortunately, then a lot of my team started to die, and now I'm close in, and you'll notice I'm being aimed at by 5 enemy ships. Not anymore, but I was. So I'm trying to kind of turn in to avoid these North Carolina shells, and miraculously I do. That was pretty lucky, but, like, sometimes you just kind of have to get lucky. There's another 2K volley. But so what I'm going to do, the reason I didn't just turn away there was because the way I saw it, if I turned and gave broadside to that guy, he was absolutely going to delete me, right? Whereas if I just kept angling in and tried to get into the island, I was a lot more likely to not get insta-gibbed than if I, you know, tried to give broadside right away. Now that I have this sort of island cover to use, I feel a little bit safer turning away because I don't feel like I'm at risk of getting immediately deleted by their battleships. Okay, so now what I'm going to do in this situation is just kind of use this island to shoot these guys. There's a hipper, I think, shooting at me. I'm not detected anymore, though, so I'm just going to use this opportunity to kind of, you know, take stock a little bit and think about what my next move is. So I think what I want to try and do is sort of disengage from this position, because the way I see it, if one of their ships charges me down, I'm just going to die. But while I have this position, I'm going to use it. So right now, the advantage that I have here is that, like, I have cover from some of my allies. So we have a bunch of battleships kind of down around in the G and H area. And like, because they're down there, the enemy team is going to find it a little bit tougher to push into me. I am still in kind of a crossfire though, and if that North Carolina pushes far enough in, again, there's only really a Hipper and a Gaida stopping him. So if that North Carolina up north pushes in around where B is, I'm going to be stuck in a crossfire. I'm going to be shot at by two sides, and I really don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and run away. So that's the plan. So I'm actually going to turn in an angle. I'm giving broadside to this Colorado, but I'm thinking about, like, what is the other alternative? Like, who else would be shooting at me? There's another 3K volley. I mean, that's just what the ship does. I'm thinking about the North Carolinas behind me, right? I would rather take broadside hits from a Colorado than from two North Carolinas. That's just the reality. Like, it's entirely possible the Colorado could kill me, but it's more likely that two North Carolinas and a Schors are going to kill me. So I'm just trying to, like, when you're in this kind of situation, you just kind of have to angle against some parts of the enemy team and just kind of hope for the best. So right now I'm just trying to kill this Colorado. We eventually kill him, so he goes down, and now I have this Hipper to shoot at, and there's the Baltimore behind the island who is radaring me, I believe. So now I'm just going to shoot this Hipper. And this is actually going to be the end of the game because a North Carolina is going to delete me in a couple seconds. And you're going to see why I was so afraid of, you know, getting up close and personal early on in the game. Any second now the shots are going to start to come in. Is that it? That's not it. So I'm going to give way too much broadside here, actually, now going back and watching this replay. But I think I'm kind of safe because I actually go undetected. But it's not so, and I'm detonated. Feels bad, man. So this replay, I think, demonstrated a lot of the strengths and weaknesses of the Schors. I think the Schors is a little bit of a weird ship in that it's really, really, really easy to kill, but you also have this insane, insane DPM. Right? I mean, you saw the just raw damage I'm putting out against those battleships, right? I mean, against the Colorado, the Nagato, even the Tier 8 battleships, you're putting out like 4K damage volleys, and you can do that every like 7.5 seconds. And that's something that this ship does really, really well. But then on the flip side, you have a lot of weaknesses in that you're really a huge target. You're not super maneuverable, and it's really, really easy for things to kill you if you're not, you know, effective about your positioning. So anyway, that North Carolina just gets obliterated by Torps. The Gaida trades with him, which I think is an okay trade. It's a Tier 6 destroyer for, well, it's a great trade for us. Tier 6 destroyer for a Tier 8 battleship. And so, like, the reason I felt okay playing that aggressively in that stage of the game, even though, here's kind of a tangent. So just like the reason I felt okay playing that aggressively at that stage of the game was because I noticed that we were really up on caps, right? So we were in a position where, like, even if we lost a few ships, we were still going to win because we had so many caps. Like, in that situation where, I'm just going to pause. Well, actually, I'm going to show the end results and then pause and talk a little bit more about the tactics I was using. So, like, we were in a situation where our team was spread out across the entire map and their team was all bunched into one area. Now, when that happens, and I actually end up second on the team, which is a pretty nice result considering the ship I'm in and the matchup I'm in with all those battleships on the enemy team. But, like, in that situation where the whole enemy team is bunched up in one place, the worst thing you can do when you're dealing with that is, like, kind of charge in one by one. But at the same time, like, in that situation, what the enemy team needs to do is basically either just wait for the enemy to push in one by one or charge out as a unit, right? And, like, the reality is that in random battles, most players don't really do that, right? So, like, in this situation, the enemy team all being in one place is a situation that very rarely results in wins for that team because, like, we have so many cap circles that even if, like, a couple of us push in by ourselves and die, in that situation, like, we're so likely to win because the enemy is all in one place, and because it's a pub game, they're not likely to be able to coordinate a unified push out of that region, if that makes any sense. Whereas literally all our team has to do is just sit there and farm them as they push out one by one. Because we have so much map control, what that means is it gives us the ability to basically crossfire the entire enemy team. So for them, it's very imperative that they push out as a unit. But as I said, they're not necessarily going to do that because it's a pub game, and that's not, like, that almost never happens with pub games, right? So I felt really okay pushing there, even though I was, like, I felt like it was a pretty good chance that I was going to get killed. I felt okay about doing that anyway because A, I'm a tier 7, so it's not like the end of the world if I die. B, we are up on ships anyway. The enemy team is in terrible map position for like a random game, and we have so many caps that it's very unlikely they're going to be able to overcome the points lead anyway, even if I do die. So that's why I felt that good playing that aggressively in the later game. Even in a ship as fragile as the Schors, I just wanted my damage. Now, if it had been a lot closer, like if we weren't up on caps, if the enemy team's positioning was better, I would be playing more passively in the later game. But in this situation, like this is one of those scenarios where your team is winning so overwhelmingly that if you want to do damage, you kind of have to play aggressively. And that's just the reality with warships. Sometimes is you get those games where your team just completely skull fucks the enemy team, and in order to get good damage numbers, you have to play kind of aggressively in the later game, as the game is kind of starting to wrap up, and you have to be able to identify those situations, right? So like in the early game, I'm playing passively because it's not clear that we're going to win. And in the late game, I'm playing a lot more aggressively because I'm thinking, okay, we're very likely to win in the map situation, with the cap situation, and with the ship like positioning. And so I'm thinking, okay, it's worthwhile for me to play a lot more aggressively because I'm likely to do damage. And that's how you can get good games in situations where you're mid-tier and your team is like utterly stomping the enemy. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little bit about how to play the Schors or how to play squishy cruisers in a bottom tier matchup in general. I've been Caligulus. Happy sailing.